The day I miscarried and hemorrhaged, my parents rushed to the hospital through heavy rain and got into a car accident on the way. I lay on the operating table and signed their surgery consent forms with blood-stained hands. I couldn't save the baby. I couldn't save my parents either. The man whose calls I couldn't get through posted a celebratory Instagram post. Congratulations to Mia's dog for working hard all night and finally becoming a mother. I weakly liked the post and he immediately sent me a text message. Unlike it, I sent him my hospital location. Come to the hospital. I need to talk to you in person. I have something important to do. I can't make it. Get your parents to go with you for the prenatal checkup. They're free anyway. Your so-called important matter is delivering puppies for her dog? How did you turn into such a jealous woman just from being pregnant? You're even jealous of a dog? I had no strength left to argue with him. Since he wouldn't come, he could talk to my lawyer instead. By the time I finished handling my parents' funeral arrangements, it was already the next evening. I dragged my exhausted body through the door. The carefully tidied house had become a complete mess. Jason was rummaging through things with his head down, carelessly tossing items onto the floor. Like he was used to it, confident that someone would always clean up after him. Hearing the door, he didn't even look up, his tone tinged with dissatisfaction. Where have you been all day on the weekend? I even had to order takeout for lunch. I froze. So, he didn't come home last night either. These past 2 years, he'd always been like this. When Mia's apartment light broke, he could get up in the middle of the night to fix it for her. But he'd forget to lock our door properly, letting a drunk stranger stumble in and giving me nightmares for an entire month. When Mia's dog was about to give birth, he could refuse to accompany me to my prenatal checkup. But he'd take a week off work to stay with her, even though that was supposed to be the vet's job. Getting no response, Jason finally looked at me, surprise flooding his eyes. Your face is so pale. Is the baby giving you trouble again? I stepped back, avoiding his hand reaching toward my abdomen, my tone flat. I called you 76 times yesterday. Why didn't you answer? Jason's hand hung in midair. He frowned at my words. Hermione, are you interrogating me? Mia and I are childhood friends. Her dog Snowball is different from the other pets in her shop. She's raised it since it was small. They have a deep bond. Snowball was giving birth, and Mia was worried sick. I had to help with the delivery. At such a critical moment of life and death, how could I have time to answer your pointless calls? It's just a prenatal checkup. Plenty of pregnant women go by themselves. At worst, you had your parents. They're free anyway. What difference does it make if I'm not there? Looking at his self-righteous expression, I really wanted to ask, what about my parents? That car accident was terrible. Dad had no vital signs by the time he reached the hospital. Mom was rushed into surgery for emergency treatment, but her injuries were severe and complex. Jason's colleague said that only if Jason performed the surgery himself would there be any chance of saving her. He said he was too busy to answer my calls, yet when I liked that Instagram post, he immediately ordered me to unlike it. Afraid Mia might read too much into it. Are you really just childhood friends? But Jason, I saw you kiss her. At the very restaurant where he'd proposed to me, even sitting in the exact same seats. In my mental haze, I didn't see the motorcycle speeding toward me. Although the driver braked in time, the tiny life inside me that was barely 3 months old was still lost. Panic flashed through Jason's usually calm eyes. Mia was too worried about Snowball, so I took her out to relax. She had a few too many drinks and... His tone softened slightly. All right, let's not talk about this. Next checkup, I'll definitely go with you. Here we go again. Using a lame excuse to brush me off, then offering a consolation prize, as if nothing had happened. But Jason, you'll never need to accompany me to another prenatal checkup. No need. Let's get divorced. Jason froze, then spoke angrily, humiliated. Hermione, do all you journalists like to blow things out of proportion? I told you it was an accident. Is this really necessary? Besides, you're just doing odd jobs in the TV station's logistics department now. You're almost 30, pregnant, and other than me, who else would want you? I work myself to the bone at the hospital every day for this family, not to come home to your unreasonable tantrums. He stormed toward the door. As he passed the entrance, he suddenly noticed a document peeking out of my bag. The words death certificate were clearly visible. Jason turned back, confused. Who died? Jason was about to pull it out for a closer look, but his phone suddenly rang. Mia's helpless, choked voice came through. Jason, one of the puppies seems to be choking on milk, and I still have customers in the shop. I'm completely overwhelmed. It's not going to die, is it? I'm so scared. Jason's face filled with concern. Don't cry. I'll be right there. With that, he rushed off without looking back. He even forgot to lock his study, which he normally never let me enter. As if possessed, I walked in, only to be stabbed in the eyes by what was under the desk. That year, I was the station's most promising new reporter, assigned to interview the old director. But the old man was arrogant and turned me away. After several days of working overtime, I had low blood sugar and fainted in the garden. Jason was the one who saved me. He said the old director was stubborn and wouldn't change his mind once it was made up. I hung my head in disappointment. The next second, an orange candy was pushed into my mouth. Jason winked at me playfully. But I admire people who work hard, so interview me instead. Later I learned he was the city's youngest medical professor. So many people wanted to interview this genius heartthrob of the medical world but couldn't, yet he made an exception for me alone. That's how Jason and I became connected. Later, we each got busier and busier. Jason looked at me with difficulty. Hermione, I know becoming a top reporter is your dream. But the elders in our family need someone to care for them. Could you resign? I promise I'll treat you well for the rest of my life. And I knew equally well that becoming an outstanding doctor was his dream too. So, I compromised. I didn't resign, but transferred to the relaxed logistics department. At least that way I could stay close to the work I loved. On many sleepless nights, I'd trace my reporter's badge under the lamp. Every time Jason caught me, he'd feel incredibly guilty and promise over and over that he'd treat me well. But now, that reporter's badge I treasured so much was being used by him to level a table leg. I used Mia's birthday to open his safe. On top was a thick craft paper envelope. Inside were all kinds of photos of the two of them together. Hugging, kissing, walking hand in hand on the beach. There were also receipts for him buying Mia a house, funding her business startup, paying for renovations. Even though the shop lost money every month, he kept subsidizing her. The words on the envelope's cover were in Jason's handwriting. Forever willing to forge ahead through thorns for your dreams. I stared at those words for a very long time. My mind flashed through these 5 years of caring for his parents, doing laundry and cooking, cleaning the house. I thought of the envy and heartache I felt watching my former colleagues full of passion, working overtime preparing interview manuscripts. Suddenly, I laughed out loud. So, he didn't know how to protect someone's dreams after all. I photographed everything and put it back in place, finally making my decision. Hello, Miss Kelly. I heard the station is selecting someone to go to Central Asia as a war correspondent, and no one has signed up yet. If you don't mind, I'd like to go. Kelly paused, then said happily, Great. I thought it was such a shame when you applied to transfer to logistics. This is a rare opportunity. It might be a bit dangerous, but your resume will be completely different when you return. Prepare yourself well then. You'll be leaving in the next few days. Hanging up the phone, I started packing. There was nothing left in this house that I cared about. Except for the sweater Mom had knitted for me before she died. I had to take that. She'd knitted me plenty of clothes when I was young, but later I grew up and Mom grew old, her eyesight not what it used to be. I didn't want her to strain herself, so I told her not to knit anymore. After I got pregnant, I suddenly became very sensitive to cold. Mom secretly knitted me a sweater anyway. Her eyes were red from straining them, but she waved it off casually. Homemade ones are warmer. I picked out good yarn. You care about the child in your belly, and I care about my child too. I was both touched and heartbroken. I never brought myself to wear it. But now, that sweater was gone. Remembering the scene when I came home, I was about to call Jason to ask. But then I saw Mia had posted on Instagram. Hee, I just mentioned the babies were cold since they were just born, and someone brought over sweaters thanks on behalf of the babies. Daddy, of course. This mommy's alteration skills aren't bad either, if I do say so myself. So Jason had gone to celebrate those puppies' birth with her. In the picture, they had their heads together, bodies pressed close. Each held 3 puppies in their arms. And I recognized at a glance. The dog clothes those puppies wore were altered from the sweater Mom had knitted for me. When I pushed open the pet shop's glass door, I happened to catch Jason and Mia eating cake with the same spoon. Jason had severe germophobia. At home, his dishes had to be disinfected and stored separately, and serving utensils had to be used when sharing food. Once, after cleaning the house all day, I was exhausted and parched, so I drank from his cup. He didn't say anything at the time, but that night, the cup appeared in the trash. Afterward, Jason explained to me that it was an occupational habit from working at the hospital. Turns out it depends on the person. Seeing me, Mia raised an eyebrow and smiled sarcastically. Hermione's here? Jason and I have never drawn boundaries since childhood. I hope you don't mind. Jason, what did I tell you? There's no way she'd divorce you. After all, a woman who failed in her career and can only rely on handouts from her husband. Without you, how would she support her child and take care of her parents? She followed you all the way here. She's really clingy. Sigh, compared to her, I'm just too thin-skinned. Guess I'll just have to keep being a strong, independent woman. Jason affectionately pinched her nose. Fine, you're the smartest, okay? You've been clever since childhood. Then he looked at me, as if forgiving a child who didn't know any better. All right, Hermione. Since you came to make peace, I'll pretend I never heard about the divorce. Go home and clean up the house first. These puppies were just born, and their condition is unstable. I need to stay with Mia for a few more days to observe them. Listening to these two people talk, I found it laughable. One being a mistress, so righteously. One whitewashing his affair so sanctimoniously. I ignored Jason and smiled sarcastically. Since Miss Mia is so capable, stealing another woman's man is one thing, but why did you conspire with my husband to steal my clothes? Dare I ask what kind of strong woman you are? The mistress kind. Several female customers who were selecting pet supplies looked at Mia in surprise. So, this handsome guy isn't your boyfriend? But you were using the same spoon. That's not very appropriate, is it? Yeah, I just complimented you too on being a good match, and you didn't deny it. Turns out he has a wife. Mia's face flushed red as she was cornered. Seeing her like this, the women curled their lips in disdain, put down the items they'd already selected, and hurried out. Mia's eyes reddened as she complained to Jason pitifully. Jason, is Hermione deliberately here to sabotage my business? I just thought that sweater was warm and soft, perfect for the puppies. She's already spent so much of your money. What clothes doesn't she have? Why does she have to slander me like this? Those were all my regular customers. How will they see me now? Can I even keep doing business? Jason tenderly wiped her tears, then turned to glare at me angrily. Hermione, I'm the one who took the clothes. Why are you taking it out on Mia? It's not like it's worth that much money. When did you become so petty? You'll gain weight later in your pregnancy anyway, and won't be able to wear it. Just have your mom knit you another one. It's not like it's made by some international master craftsman. Why are you treating it like it's so precious? Looking at his condescending expression and the disdain in his eyes, I couldn't help but slap him across the face, roaring. Yes, what my mother made is precious. Because she can never knit me clothes again. While you two were being all lovey-dovey, and you'd rather accompany her dog through labor than answer my calls for help, my parents died. Jason's eyes flew wide open. He instinctively released Mia. What did you say? How could? Before he could finish, Mia suddenly shoved me hard. How dare you hit someone? It's just a crappy sweater. Who cares? I'll give it back to you. She stripped the clothes off the puppies and viciously threw them into a litter box the employee was about to take out, saying your parents died. I just saw your uncle and aunt at the supermarket this morning. I just can't stand women like you who use pregnancy to lie and manipulate, making scenes and doing everything possible to control your husband. You're a parasite, a disgrace to women everywhere. The litter box hadn't been cleaned yet. The clumped feces stuck to the sweater, giving off a foul smell. Mom's love had ultimately been ruined beyond recognition. I didn't mean to, I didn't know the boss would. The employee was frightened by my bloodshot eyes, looking completely helpless. Anger and hatred burned my internal organs. I turned toward the instigator and raised my hand high. But before my palm could land on Mia's face, Jason's slap struck me. It made a crisp sound in the quiet shop. The slap was loud, a sharp, clean crack that cut through the soft whimpering of the newborn puppies and the hum of the pet shop's air conditioner. My head was forced to the side, my hair falling forward to cover my face. The skin of my cheek instantly bloomed with a hot, throbbing heat, but inside, I felt absolutely nothing. It was as if the physical blow had landed on a corpse. The woman who could feel pain, who could cry, who could beg for a sliver of his attention. She had died on that operating table 48 hours ago, surrounded by the scent of copper and the cold, sterile air of the emergency room. Jason's chest heaved. He stood there, his hand still hovering in the air, his fingers trembling slightly. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of panic crossed his features, a sudden realization of what he had just done. But then, as he looked at Mia, who had shrunk back with a perfectly timed, tearful gasp, his expression hardened again. The defensiveness of a guilty man surged back to protect his ego. You forced my hand, Hermione. Jason's voice was too loud, echoing off the glass displays of the pet shop. Look at yourself. You've become completely unhinged. Mia was only trying to help. It was just a sweater. Why do you have to be so vicious? Why do you have to resort to violence? I didn't answer him. I didn't even touch my burning cheek. I slowly pushed my hair back behind my ear and looked at him. My eyes must have been terrifyingly empty, because when Jason met my gaze, he instinctively took a step back. The anger in his eyes faltered, replaced by a sudden, uneasy confusion. He was used to my tears. He was used to me arguing, explaining, pleading for him to understand. He was not used to this deep, stagnant silence. Hermione, he muttered, his voice dropping a fraction. Don't look at me like that. I ignored him entirely. I turned my body and looked down at the litter box. There, lying in the soiled, gray clay, was the sweater. The soft, cream-colored wool. The yarn my mother had spent weeks squinting over, her arthritic fingers, pushing through the pain just to ensure her daughter and future grandchild would be warm, was now smeared with wet cat urine and clumped feces. One of the sleeves, which Mia had carelessly cut and restitched with cheap pink thread to fit a dog, was partially torn. I bent down. What are you doing? Jason's voice rose again, tinged with disgust and embarrassment. Hermione, stop. Don't be ridiculous. If you want a sweater, I'll buy you 10 of them. I'll buy you designer ones. Stop making a scene in public. I didn't hear him. I reached my bare hand into the dirty litter box. My fingers closed around the soiled wool. It felt heavy, cold, and wet. I pulled it out, cradling the filthy bundle against my chest, not caring that the foul-smelling clay smeared onto my clean coat. It was the last thing my mother had ever made for me. It was the only physical piece of her love I had left in this world. Mia watched me from behind Jason, her eyes wide with a mixture of disgust and triumph. Jason, she's really lost her mind. Look at her. She's touching dirty litter. Is she trying to make us look bad? I stood up straight. I didn't look at Mia. She wasn't worth my anger. She was merely a symptom of the rot that had consumed my marriage. I looked only at Jason. We are done, I said. My voice was quiet, steady, and entirely devoid of emotion. Before he could respond, I turned and walked out of the pet shop. The small bell above the door chimed merrily behind me, signaling my departure from his life. I walked down the street in the twilight, the cold autumn wind biting at my face, but the heat on my left cheek remained. I found a public park, quiet and deserted in the evening dampness, and walked into the public restroom. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, casting a sickly green glow over the cracked mirror. I placed the filthy sweater into the sink and turned on the cold water tap. With trembling, raw hands, I began to wash it. I didn't have soap, so I used the cheap, pink liquid soap from the dispenser on the wall. I scrubbed the wool, watching the gray, muddy water swirl down the drain. The smell of cat litter slowly faded, replaced by the sharp, synthetic scent of artificial lavender. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, the dark gray stains on the cream-colored wool wouldn't entirely disappear. The fibers were stretched, the shape ruined by miasishisors. Some things, once broken, could never be restored to their original beauty. A single tear finally escaped my eye, hitting the wet wool and disappearing into the fibers. I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cold tile of the wall. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered in my heart. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect your gift. I'm sorry I couldn't protect myself. After a long time, I wrung the sweater out as best as I could, placed it carefully into a clean plastic bag for my purse, and walked out. My next stop was an office building downtown. It was late, past 8 o'clock, but the lights on the 12th floor were still on. Evelyn Vance, a senior partner at one of the city's top family law firms and a longtime friend of my father, was waiting for me. When I walked into her office, she stood up immediately. Her eyes fell on the faint, reddish-purple bruise forming on my left cheek, and then on the plastic bag I was clutching. Hermione, Evelyn said, her voice dropping in shock. What happened to your face? Jason, I said simply. I sat down in the leather chair opposite her desk. I felt incredibly light, as if my soul had already detached from my body, leaving only a shell behind. I need a divorce. And I need it done quickly, quietly, and ruthlessly. Evelyn's face hardened. She was a veteran of the family courts, a woman who had seen the worst of humanity, but she had known my family for years. She walked over, knelt beside my chair, and gently took my hand. Did he do this to you? Yes, I said. But that is the least of it. I opened my bag and pulled out the folder I had taken from Jason's safe, along with a USB drive containing the photographs of the safe's contents. I also pulled out the hospital documents, the death certificates of my parents, and my own medical report detailing the spontaneous abortion and emergency curettage. From Sunday night, Evelyn took the documents, her eyes scanning them quickly. As she read, her jaw tightened, and a profound silence filled the room. "My God, Hermione," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Jonathan and Martha, both of them? And the baby, why didn't Jason, where was he?" "He was delivering his childhood friend's dog," I said, my voice flat, like a reporter reading a weather update. "He ignored 76 calls from me and the hospital. He told me he was too busy. When I tried to tell him tonight that my parents were dead, his friend claimed she saw them at the supermarket this morning, and Jason believed her. He called me a liar, a parasite, and then he hit me." Evelyn stood up, her eyes blazing with a quiet, lethal fury. She walked back to her desk and picked up a pen. "We're going to ruin him, Hermione," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I will personally handle this case. Based on these financial records, he has transferred over $400,000 of your shared marital assets to Mia Lynn over the past 2 years under the guise of business loans and renovations, without your consent. Under the law, this is a clear dissipation of marital assets. We will freeze her shop's accounts immediately. We will demand full restitution." She looked at the medical reports and the photo of my bruised face, which she had already begun capturing with her professional camera. "And as for the domestic abuse and the gross negligence, while he may not be criminally liable for failing to answer his phone during an off-duty emergency, his professional reputation as a genius medical professor will not survive this. The hospital board will have to be notified. The public will know." "I don't care about the public," I said softly, looking out the window at the city lights. "I just want to be free. I am leaving for Central Asia in 3 days. Evelyn paused, her pen hovering. "Central Asia? As a war correspondent? Hermione, it's incredibly dangerous there right now. You've just been through a physical and emotional trauma." "If I stay here, I will suffocate," I interrupted gently. "My parents always wanted me to fly high. I gave up my dreams for a man who used my reporter's badge to level his desk. I need to find myself again, Evelyn. Even if it's in the middle of a desert, under the sound of artillery. I need to know I am still alive." Evelyn looked at me for a long moment, seeing the unbreakable resolve in my eyes. She sighed, her expression softening into one of deep respect. "All right," she said. "Leave everything here to me. Sign these power of attorney forms. By the time you board that plane, Jason Taylor will receive a storm he never saw coming." The next morning, the sun rose over the city, cold and indifferent. Jason walked into the first affiliated hospital of the medical university. He had slept poorly the previous night. After Hermione had walked out of the pet shop, he had stayed with Mia for a few hours to comfort her, but the lingering image of Hermione's empty, hollow eyes kept flashing in his mind. "Why did she look at me like that?" he thought, adjusting his white lab coat as he walked down the corridor of the cardiothoracic department. And what was that nonsense about her parents dying? She's really gone too far with her lies just to get my attention. He walked into the doctor's lounge, expecting the usual warm greetings from his colleagues and residents. As the youngest chief surgeon and professor in the department, he was accustomed to being looked up to being the center of admiration. But today, the lounge was silent. Dr. Alan Cooper, a senior surgeon and Jason's longtime colleague, was standing by the coffee machine. When Jason entered, Alan didn't smile. He slowly turned his head, his eyes cold, almost disgusted. "Morning, Alan," Jason said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Do we have the schedule for the valve replacement surgery this afternoon?" Alan didn't answer. He walked over to the door, closed it, and turned to face Jason. "Jason," Alan said, his voice dangerously low. "Where the hell were you on Sunday night?" Jason frowned, his ego bristling. "I told you. I had an urgent personal matter to attend to. My phone was on silent. Is there a problem?" "I wasn't the primary on-call surgeon." "No, you weren't the primary," Alan said, taking a step closer. "But you were the designated secondary specialist." There was a 12-car pileup on the highway in the middle of a torrential downpour. Dr. Harris was already in surgery room 1 with a ruptured aorta. We had another emergency patient brought in, a massive thoracic aortic dissection. The patient was Martha Taylor. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The name registered, but his brain refused to connect the dots. "Martha Taylor? That's your mother-in-law, Jason," Alan said, his voice dripping with venom. "Her car was crushed by a semi-truck while she and her husband were speeding to the hospital. Why were they speeding? Because your wife, Hermione, was in the back of an ambulance, hemorrhaging from a severe miscarriage. She was alone. The blood drained from Jason's face. The lounge seemed to tilt. What did you say? No, that's impossible. Mia said she saw them at the supermarket.
Mia?
That girl from the pet shop. Alan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound.
You
ignored 76 calls from your wife and this hospital because of her? Your father-in-law, Jonathan, was dead on arrival. His skull was fractured.
Your
mother-in-law was rushed into the ER. We tried to call you. We needed your specific expertise for the arterial reconstruction. Your wife, she was lying on the gurney in the adjacent room, still bleeding, and she signed the surgical consent forms with her hands literally covered in her own blood. She was begging us to find you. Alan took a folder from the table and slammed it against Jason's chest. She died, Jason. Martha Taylor died on the operating table because we couldn't bridge the dissection in time. If you had answered your phone, if you had been here, she might have had a 20% chance. Instead, you were, what? Delivering puppies? Jason's knees went weak. The folder fell from his hand, scattering papers across the floor. He stumbled back, his back hitting the lockers. No, she was lying, Jason whispered, his voice cracking, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. Hermione was she was trying to manipulate me. She was pregnant. She was fine. She was pregnant, Alan corrected him, his eyes boring into Jason's soul.
She
miscarried. The baby is gone, Jason. Your parents-in-law are gone. They are in the morgue downstairs. Go see for yourself if you think she's lying. Jason didn't hear the rest of Alan's words. He turned and bolted out of the lounge, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He ran down the stairs, ignoring the elevators, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached the administrative office and practically threw himself at the computer terminal. With shaking, sweating fingers, he logged into the hospital's patient registry. He typed in the name, Martha Taylor. Status, deceased. Time of death, Sunday, 10:42 p.m. He typed in, Jonathan Taylor. Status, deceased. Time of death, Sunday, 9:15 p.m. DOA. He typed in, Hermione Taylor. Admission diagnosis, spontaneous complete abortion, hemorrhagic shock. Treatment, emergency curettage, blood transfusion. Jason stared at the screen. The blue light reflected off his pale, sweating face. He clicked on the digital consent forms. There, at the bottom of the page, was the signature. It was not the neat, elegant handwriting Hermione usually
possessed.
It was a jagged, trembling, incomplete scrawl. Next to the signature pad, the nurse had logged a note. Patient hand stained with maternal/fetal
blood.
Document signed under extreme emotional distress. He remembered Sunday night. He remembered the rain beating against the windows of Mia's pet shop.
He
remembered the smell of the warm milk he was heating for the puppies.
He
remembered seeing his phone light up over and over again with Hermione's name, and how he had flipped the phone face down, muttering to Mia about how clingy and annoying his wife was. He remembered his own Instagram post, congratulations to Mia's dog for working hard all night and finally becoming a mother. He remembered ordering her to unlike it. And then he remembered last night. He remembered looking at her pale face, her empty eyes, and he remembered the sound of his own hand striking her cheek. Yes, what my mother made is precious. Because she can never knit me clothes again. While you two were being all lovey-dovey, my parents died. A violent wave of nausea hit Jason. He fell to his knees in the quiet corner of the records room, clutching his stomach, dry heaving onto the polished linoleum
floor.
Oh my God, he gasped, his voice cracking into a sob. Oh my God, what have I
done?
Jason drove like a madman through the city streets, ignoring red lights, his hands shaking so violently on the steering wheel that the car veered wildly across the lanes. He arrived at their apartment complex, slammed the door of his car, and ran up the stairs. He threw the front door open, his voice cracking as he screamed her name into the empty space. Hermione. Hermione. The apartment was deathly quiet. The mess from the weekend was gone, not because she had cleaned it, but because the space felt hollowed out. He ran to the master bedroom. He threw open the closet doors. It was completely empty. All of her clothes, her shoes, her small jewelry box, everything was gone. Only His own clothes hung there, looking suddenly lonely and clinical. He ran to the bathroom. Her toothbrush was gone. Her skincare bottles were gone. He ran to his study, the room he had strictly forbidden her from entering. The door was wide open. He looked under the desk. The desk leg, which had been uneven for months, was now resting flat on the floor. The reporter's badge, the silver and blue badge she had earned during her first year as a journalist, the one he had carelessly shoved under the leg to balance the wood, was gone. On the desk, where his safe sat, the heavy steel door was swung wide open. The thick craft paper envelope was gone. The photographs of him and Mia, the receipts for the house he had bought her, the business transactions, everything, had vanished. Jason collapsed onto his office chair, his head in his hands. The silence of the apartment was suffocating, pressing down on him like a physical weight. For the past 2 years, he had taken this place and the woman who kept it entirely for granted. He had assumed that no matter how late he stayed out, no matter how many times he ignored her, she would always be here, sitting under the warm glow of the living room lamp, waiting to ask him if he wanted dinner. He had called her a parasite. He had told her that she was 30, pregnant, and that nobody else would want her. But she wasn't pregnant anymore. Her baby was dead. Her parents were dead. And she had left him. His phone rang suddenly in his pocket. The sharp sound made him jump. He pulled it out frantically, hoping against hope that it was her. But the screen showed Mia's name. Jason's expression darkened. A sudden, cold wave of anger washed over his guilt. He answered the phone, his voice raw and shaking. What? Jason. Mia's voice was hysterical, crying over the line. You have to come to the shop right now. Some men in suits came here. They served me with some legal papers. They said my bank accounts are frozen. They said your wife is suing me for marital asset dissipation. They're going to shut down my shop. Jason, you have to do something. Tell Hermione to stop this. Did you see them? Jason asked, his voice dead and quiet. Mia paused, her sobbing faltering. What? See who? Hermione's parents, Jason whispered, his eyes staring blankly at the wall. You told me last night that you saw them at the supermarket. You said they were fine. You said she was lying to manipulate me. I. Mia stammered, her voice turning defensive and panicked. I saw them, Jason. You know how old people look the same from behind. It was an honest mistake. They died on Sunday night, Mia. Jason roared, his voice exploding into the receiver, tears finally spilling over his eyes. Jonathan died on impact. Martha died on my operating table while I was at your shop holding a puppy. My child died. And you lied to me. You told me she was making it up. Jason, how can you blame me? Mia cried back, her tone turning sharp and ugly. I didn't force you to stay. You were the one who wanted to be with me. You were the one who bought me the shop. You were the one who wanted to play the hero. Don't you dare put this on me now that your perfect little life is ruined. Jason stared at the phone. The illusion of the sweet, innocent, independent childhood friend shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. He saw her now for what she truly was, a selfish, manipulative parasite who had systematically fed on his vanity and his guilt to extract whatever she wanted from him. But worst of all, he realized that he had been her willing accomplice. He had destroyed his own family for a fantasy. He hung up the phone without another word, blocking her number. He tried to dial Hermione's number. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later. He called her station, his voice desperate as he spoke to the receptionist. I need to speak to Hermione Taylor. This is her husband. It's an emergency. I'm sorry, Dr. Taylor. The receptionist's voice was polite but firm. Hermione Taylor has transferred out of the logistics department. She is no longer in the building. Where is she? Please, I need to know. She has taken an international assignment as a war correspondent. She left for Central Asia this morning. The phone slipped from Jason's hand, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. The transport plane rattled violently as it descended through the heavy, dust-laden clouds over Central Asia. I sat near the small, scratched window, wearing a heavy blue flak jacket with the word press emblazoned in bold, white letters across the chest. A tactical helmet sat on my lap. Around me were other journalists, seasoned, battle-hardened men and women with weather-beaten faces and quiet eyes. Some were checking their camera equipment. Others were sleeping through the turbulence as if it were nothing more than a gentle cradle. I looked down at my hands. They were clean now, the stains of blood and cat litter long washed away, but my fingernails were still short and ragged. In my pocket, I felt the cold, hard metal of my old reporter's badge.
It was
Scratched, the edges slightly bent from being wedged under the table leg, but it felt like a shield. Next to it was the small plastic bag containing my mother's sweater. I hadn't been able to wash out the faint gray stains entirely, but the scent of cheap lavender had faded, replaced by the clean, neutral smell of the high altitude. First time in a hot zone? I looked up. A middle-aged man with a graying beard and a camera strap slung over his shoulder was looking at me from the opposite seat. He had a flask in his hand, offering it to me with a faint, sympathetic smile. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "First time?" "You look calm," he noted, taking a sip from the flask. "Usually the greenhorns are sweating or throwing up by now. The border conflict here is unpredictable. Artillery fire is constant. You sure you're ready for this, kid?" I looked out the window as the plane broke through the cloud cover. Below us, the vast, rugged expanse of the desert stretched out, scarred by dry riverbeds, and the distant, black plumes of smoke rising from a shelled outpost.
It was a
Harsh, unforgiving landscape, devoid of comfort, where life and death were separated by a matter of inches and seconds. "I am ready," I said softly. For the past 2 years, I had lived in a gilded cage of my own making, slowly, suffocating under the weight of a man's indifference and my own compromises.
I
Had let myself believe that a quiet life in logistics, doing laundry and waiting for a husband who didn't respect me, was enough. But looking down at the desolate earth below, I felt a strange, wild sense of
peace.
here. The danger was real, the pain was real, but so was the sky. So was the truth. When the plane landed on the dusty tarmac of the military airfield, the heat hit me like a physical wall. The air tasted of dust, aviation fuel, and cordite. I adjusted my helmet, slung my recording equipment over my shoulder, and stepped out onto the metal stairs. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I didn't
Pull back.
I took a deep breath of the hot, dirty air and smiled. For the first time in 5 years, I was flying. 6 months later, the city's medical community was small, and gossip traveled faster than any disease. Dr. Jason Taylor's fall from grace was spectacular. The hospital board had conducted a formal inquiry into the events of that fateful Sunday night, while Jason was off duty and could not be legally charged with medical malpractice for failing to answer his phone. His ethical and professional standing had been completely demolished. The emergency department staff, the nurses, and his own colleagues knew the
Truth.
They knew that a brilliant surgeon had allowed his mother-in-law to die on the table because he was busy helping a friend's dog give birth. They knew he had neglected his hemorrhaging wife. The final blow came when Evelyn Vance submitted the evidence of domestic abuse and financial dissipation to the court and the medical board. A prominent newspaper ran a feature on the case, highlighting the double standards of a genius medical professor who was a hero in the operating room but a monster at home. The university stripped Jason of his professor title and his teaching credentials. The hospital, fearing a massive public relations nightmare, demoted him from chief of cardiothoracic surgery to a basic clinical residency supervisor, stripping him of his private office and his research funding. He was no longer the golden boy of the medical world. He was a pariah. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Jason sat in his dark, quiet office at the clinic. He looked older. The sharp, confident edge to his jaw was gone, replaced by a graying stubble and deep, dark hollows under his eyes. The door opened and Mia walked in. She no longer looked like the elegant, strong, independent woman she had claimed to be. Her pet shop had gone bankrupt 3 months ago after the court froze her accounts and ordered her to return the $400,000 of dissipated marital assets to Hermione's legal representative. Her reputation in the community was ruined. She was widely known as the mistress who had destroyed a family. "Jason," Mia whispered, her voice desperate, her clothes wet from the rain.
The
"Landlord is evicting me from my apartment. I have nowhere to go. The court is taking everything. You have to help me. You still have money, don't you?
can't.
We just get a small place together?" Jason looked at her. Once, he had found her vulnerability endearing.
He had
Found her tears irresistible. Now, looking at her, he felt only a profound, freezing disgust. "Get out," Jason said, his voice flat and dead. "Jason, please," she cried, reaching out to touch his arm. "We've known each Other since we were kids. You promised you would always protect my dreams. Jason violently flayed his arm back, shaking her off as if she were a venomous insect. My child is dead because of your dreams, Jason said, his voice rising a cold, lethal anger burning in his eyes. My family is dead. My career is ruined. And every time I look at your face, I remember the smell of that cat litter.
I
Remember what I did to my wife. If you ever come near me again, Mia, I swear to God I will make sure you have nothing left to lose. Mia stared at him, terrified by the sheer hatred in his eyes. She took a step back, her lips trembling, and then she turned and ran out of the office, her heels clicking frantically down the corridor. Jason sat back down in his chair. He pulled out his phone and opened Instagram. He had not posted anything in 6 months. His follower count had plummeted, but he didn't care. He kept his phone for only one reason. He searched for a specific account. Hermione's account was no longer private. It was now a verified public page, filled with thousands of followers. There were no pictures of food, no pictures of cozy apartments, no pictures of him. Instead, the grid was filled with images of war-torn streets, of children smiling amidst rubble, of dusty refugees clutching bags of flour, of brave soldiers standing guard under a desert sun. And in every third or fourth photo, there she was. She wore no makeup. Her skin was tanned and dusty, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. But her eyes, they were magnificent. They shone with a fierce, brilliant light, a strength and a beauty that he had never seen in her during all their years of marriage. He clicked on her latest post. It was a video. Jason turned on the old television in his living room. The apartment was a complete mess. He hadn't cleaned it since she left. Dust coated the shelves, empty takeout boxes and dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen sink. Like he was used to it, he had expected someone to clean up after him. But no one ever came. He sat on the stained sofa, holding a glass of cheap whiskey, his eyes glued to the screen. The evening news was broadcasting a special report. And now we turn live to our foreign correspondent, Hermione Taylor, who is currently on the front lines of the border conflict in Central Asia. The screen flickered, transitioning to a live feed. The background was a ruined town square, the skeletal remains of buildings rising up into a gray, smoky sky. The sound of distant artillery fire echoed through the speakers, a dull, rhythmic thudding that made the camera shake slightly. And there she was. Hermione stood in the center of the frame, holding a microphone with a steady hand. She wore her blue flak jacket and helmet. Her face was smudged with soot, but her voice was calm, clear, and incredibly powerful as she reported on the civilian casualties of the recent shelling. The tragedy here is not just the loss of infrastructure, but the loss of generations, Hermione said, her voice carrying an emotional depth that captivated the audience. Behind every casualty figure is a family torn apart, a dream turned to ash. But amidst the ruin, the spirit of the people remains unbroken. They continue to survive, to rebuild, and to look toward a future beyond the violence. Suddenly, a loud, whistling screech filled the air, followed by a massive explosion just a few hundred yards behind her. The camera feed shook violently, tilting toward the dirt. The sound of screaming and gunfire erupted in the background. Jason jumped to his feet, dropping his whiskey glass. It shattered on the floor, the liquid soaking into the carpet, but he didn't notice. His heart hammered in, his chest, his breath catching in his throat. Hermione, he screamed at the television screen. Hermione, get down. Please. God, get down. On the screen, the camera quickly recovered, panning back to find her. Hermione had been knocked to her knees by the blast wave. Her helmet was slightly askew, and a small trickle of blood ran down her temple where a piece of flying debris had grazed her. But she didn't panic. She didn't cry. She slowly stood back up, adjusting her helmet, her face calm and resolute. She wiped the blood from her forehead with the back of her hand, a gesture so simple, so strong, that it took Jason's breath away. She picked up her microphone, looked directly into the camera lens, and continued her report without a single tremor in her voice. The shelling continues, she said, looking straight through the camera, straight into the living rooms of millions of viewers, straight into Jason's eyes. But the truth will not be silenced. Jason fell back onto the sofa, tears streaming down his face, a choking sob escaping his throat. He saw her. He saw how beautiful she was when she was whole. He saw the woman he had tried to break, the woman he had tried to turn into a quiet domestic. servant, now standing tall amidst the fire and the ruin, completely independent, completely free. He realized then the ultimate, devastating truth. He had not just lost a wife. He had destroyed his own chance at redemption.
He
Had had a queen in his home, and he had traded her for a handful of dirt. He reached out his hand, his fingers touching the cold glass of the television screen, tracing the contour of her dusty, beautiful face. But she was thousands of miles away, in a world where he did not exist, where his name was nothing more than a faint, unpleasant memory of a past life. On the screen, Hermione finished her broadcast, gave a brief nod to the camera, and the feed cut back to the studio. The screen turned back to the local news anchors, but Jason remained staring at the empty glass, sitting alone in the dark, suffocating house, trapped in the eternal, freezing winter of his own regret.